So many organizations only measure success in terms of numbers. What does success look like for GroundUp specifically?
Actually, I remember a quote from a friend, Chris. He had written that quote into his signature. And it said that it's very difficult, it's very easy to lie with statistic, but it's very difficult to prove something without statistic. And that's why the number plays a lot of significant role. But number alone is not enough, you know. A lot of problem that we are facing is because of a particular behavior traits that we adopted as a society, as a nation, as community, as people or representative of certain region. Behavior shift is very difficult to quantify in numbers. So the numbers must also marry along with the narratives and qualitative information. No, qualitative information actually tells us the shifts in the way people have started to see, observe, feel connected with certain things. And that matters a lot because behavior shift is what is going to take us towards a long-term solution or towards a long-term survival of human race, not only the biodiversity. And for ground up, like, while we, of course, like, for a quantitative thing, because we work a lot with the numbers and because it's a business, we have to acquire the data in quantitative way, like in terms of the number of hectares, number of species that are there, how many of them are IUCN category threatened species or things, what is the population that is bouncing back, or like, in terms of the livelihood, how the women are gaining like, income. As a means, the added income, etc. Those kind of information we gather for our quantitative information, and also to get like, a sense of return, etc., etc. But in terms of the qualitative things, like what really matters is that we position biodiversity as one of the stakeholder into all the discussion that we have. That when we say that biodiversity is a stakeholder, meaning that when we say that stakeholder engagement, financial allocations are actually governed, right? For addressing these particular stakeholder. When you give biodiversity as one of the stakeholder label, which means that it must receive some level of investment. So for us, what matters is that before intervention, before we enter into the landscape and after we enter into the landscape, how biodiversity was actually perceived by people. How did that change? How did biodiversity started to become a not just as like a one of the partial or peripheral beneficiary, but actually one of the central stakeholder into the discussions. And that change when you see where in usual trends of development or finances, biodiversity was not even like, considered as a part and parcel of the dialogue. It was just limited to list of species or trees that we planted. But we actually having engaged with this kind of like people, biodiversity gaining a central traction. That's the success that we actually measure ourselves with. Like that the biodiversity become a stakeholder. There are quantifiable tangible investment, but also returns that are recorded along that biodiversity. And also the narrative shifts. Like you start to see like how politicians or how the panchayat leaders, how local communities start using the word like, non-human beings in their own ways or like biodiversity in their own ways. Like in Pangi, we say, I heard people saying कि वो तो भगवान की संतान है और वो वाइल्ड लाइफ जो थी वो हमारे से भी पहले से यहाँ पे है तो वो लोग तो ओरिजिनल एंसिस्टर्स है इस जगह के. So that kind of like, notion when you start to see being experienced among the people, that gives a sense of like that you have been able to like, elevate the stance or significance of biodiversity. These are some of the examples. Also for the non-English speakers, the non-Hindi speakers, or also people who don't understand Hindi, I just wanted to translate that quote like, in Pangi, people said that the non-human beings, wildlife, are like, santan or like, offsprings of God, and they must be protected because they were in that landscape even before human arrived. So they are the true indigenous beings of that landscape, and how they assign that kind of notion to non-human beings is also extremely important and significant.